Good morning, and thank you for the warm introduction. Whenever I'm introduced as an oboist, people are all of a sudden curious. And on my CV, it does say that I played in the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra as a very young man. But if it would have been violin or piano, it would be of only passing interest to anybody but the oboe. And the oboe has a very Eastern sound. It has a plaintive quality. And I'm reminded, especially in front of an audience such as this one, that wonderful album with Ravi Shankar and India, where East meets West, in a grand cultural explosion of music of varying cultures. And in a way, it's a metaphor and a symbol of the power of cultural understanding and cultural diversity when we meet. So maybe it's not entirely irrelevant that I have a musical past. And I want to start by acknowledging that we are on the traditional territory of the Mississauga of New Credit First Nation. And I want to also start by saying that from agriculture to academe to security to sport and our fundamental democratic values, Canada and India share so much. And thank you, Cassie, for that warm introduction. We've had a chance to spend an awful lot of time together. And your understanding of Canada and India, the potential of our relationship, the gravitas you bring to the job, with a smile and with charm, is very much appreciated by the government of Canada. And I'm also very glad to be here with the High Commissioner, Nadir Patel. And we met for the first time, actually, in India. I was the first Trudeau minister to travel to India. And here's an interesting sidebar of all of that, because as Minister of Natural Resources, I had to meet with 5 Indian ministers to cover my portfolio. A Minister of Electricity, a Minister in charge of coal, a Minister of Forestry, a Minister of Mining, a Minister of Nuclear Energy. And in each case, it was a pleasure to compare notes about our responsibilities across the ocean and the divide. But again, the High Commissioner was of great help, and through you, I would like to thank the finest public service in the world, and that is Canada's public service. I am a nephew of a former Deputy Minister in the Government of Canada, and we were always raised to believe that there was no calling more noble in the calling of public service, and there is no better example dear than you, and through you, your colleagues, not only in the Foreign Service, but throughout the public service of Canada. I also had an opportunity to meet again Minister Piyush Goyal. I had met him in his previous role when I was in India, and then I had a chance to reacquaint with him at the G20 meeting in Japan just a few weeks ago. He, as you know, is the new Minister of Commerce and Industry. And I look forward to deepening that relationship with him, the people of Winnipeg South Centre willing, and the Prime Minister, because as you all know, we have an election coming up in October, and we can never be certain of our fate after the people speak. But I am confident that if they choose us again, we have developed very important relationships abroad, particularly with India. And also, it's a remarkable event every time the people of India go to the polls. But this time even more remarkable, because I think it was 900 million people who were eligible to vote. It's very hard for a Canadian to get our minds around that number. And a turnout of 67%, and that is a substantial majority exercising their rights. And I once asked this question, and here maybe you have it, how many polling stations are there in India? Over 1 million polling stations. It is the most vibrant and the largest democracy in the world. It's really quite a marvel. And what struck me so much when I was in India in 2016, and what resonates with me still, is the vibrancy of India's people, the confidence of its entrepreneurs, the energy and the spirit of hard work. And to experience that extraordinary energy and potential in person was a very special experience for me. It was not the first time I was in India. I led a business delegation. When I was president and CEO of the Business Council of Canada, we toured virtually the whole country. And I was so impressed then and continue to be, not only about the diversity, but the depth and the cultural richness and the history of this magnificent country. Now, Canada, of course, is relatively small by population, but we are already home to one of the largest Indo-Canadian communities in the world. There are more international students now from India than of any other nationality, and we would like to see that continue to grow. And in the coming days, our government will announce an investment of more than $150 million in our international education strategy. This investment will make it easier for the next generation to study alongside each other, from Montreal to Mumbai, and to create the innovations of the future together. We want to embrace and celebrate all of these things that we share, and to be ambitious about our future together. We were talking a minute ago about today's reality. I think it's important that we also talk about the reality of the next generation. What do we want the Canadian-Indian relationship to look like 20 years from now? And that is a challenge and a shared aspiration that involves many of the people in this room. Where will your companies be 20 years from now? Who are the entrepreneurs of the future? What is the alignment? What is the convergence between the interests of our young entrepreneurs in our two countries? And this education strategy is a very important part of that. And of course, India is one of the fastest growing economies in the world, and Canada is part of that. In 2018, the two-way trade of goods between Canada and India totaled $10 billion. And as Cassie said before, the modesty of the numbers reflects the past, not the promise of the future. So I believe that this is a solid foundation, and that an even stronger Canada-India relationship will bring greater prosperity for both countries and a brighter future for our peoples. We have many examples of that closeness already. More than 400 Canadian companies are on the ground in India, 1,000 actively doing business there. Canadian jet engines propel 10 million passengers every year to their destinations in India. Canadian designed rail cars move 5 million people daily in Mumbai and Delhi, which is a good thing because that means they're not in cars on the road. I've experienced that too. And increasingly, Indian families are investing their wealth in diamonds. Did you know that? Canadian diamonds. Canadian diamond miners export upward of $1 billion annually to India. And one of my personal favorite brands, French fries, particularly McCain French fries, was first set up in India in the late 90s. Now 10 million Indians eat McCain French fries every month. I often say to myself, what is the most popular food in the world? What is that food that actually everybody loves? I think it's French fries. Do you agree? Who in the room doesn't like French fries? Not one hand goes up. I think we're awesome. Businesses are growing even closer. Our Trade Commissioner Services market diversification efforts are reaping rewards in India. And we have plenty of examples of first-time sales and first-time buyers. An Ontario lumber company secured its first order for hickory wood from a first-time buyer, a steel company in Punjab. A pyrotechnics company won its first order from the Indian Navy for the supply of 500 special flares. And an award-winning 3D animation and visual effects company from India is establishing a post-production VFX studio in Western Canada. These are all good examples because we know the larger firms are comfortable with exporting, but it's the small and medium-sized businesses that face the largest swells when they push towards overseas markets. And for more than 120 years, the Trade Commissioner Service has been helping Canadian companies navigate international markets. For example, trade commissioners recently helped form a new partnership between T-Hub, one of India's largest accelerators, and Waterloo's Communitech. The Global Bridge Canada-India program was launched in 2018, and the first intake of Canadian startups took up residency in Hyderabad. One startup was O2 Canada, a company that produces low-cost anti-pollution air masks. And after landing its first sales with the Hyderabad police force, the company is exploring further sales across India to other police forces and military units. The examples go on and on and on. To Carleton University's Canada-India Center for Excellence. And our successes go much beyond traditional export or business ties. Our Trade Commissioner Service has brought together partners such as Carleton University and the All India Council for Technical Education in support of women tech entrepreneurs in both countries. And I want to pause there for a minute to talk a little bit about trade diversification. When the Prime Minister appointed me Canada's first Minister of International Trade Diversification, it was thought that that meant that we wanted to diversify our export markets, and that's true, we did. 75% of Canada's exports go to one country, the United States. You may have been following some issues with canola in China. It is important that we diversify export markets because it makes good strategic sense for the country, but diversification means something else. It means diversifying those who create the wealth. How many women entrepreneurs are fully engaged? How about Indigenous entrepreneurs from Canada? We are leaving too much on the table, and we have a series of programs in the Canadian government to try to make it possible for more and more entrepreneurs to become involved in international trade who have not been, because we have been too comfortable with those associations and relationships for generations. Our relationship with the United States is based on geography, on history. We marry each other, we shop at each other's malls, we work in each other's companies. It's a relationship that will always be the most important. But it makes good economic sense for us to diversify, and that's what we're doing. This is what happens when you have 4 weeks in a row in question period in House of Commons. I see John Beard back there, don't I? John, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
I was always very quiet in question period.
You know what's like by the end of June? For those of you who aren't parliamentarians, maybe you have kids in school, and you know what happens to kids in school in the last 2 weeks of June? Or if you have any teachers and the weather gets warm and you want to be outside and you want to play, well, it's the same thing for parliamentarians. So we're all suffering from the end of June blues and excitement. So we know that trade works best when it benefits everyone. And our government wants more than ever to create wealth and jobs by growing businesses through trade. Let me pause there too to talk about wealth creation and wealth distribution. We have an awful lot of robust debate in our country about how we're going to divide the nation's wealth. And you want more investment in post-secondary education, and you want more in healthcare, and you say, well, that's fine, but how about infrastructure? And I say, actually, what we need is more investment in symphony orchestras. But we don't talk an awful lot about who's creating the wealth that we're going to distribute. And that's you. That is the entrepreneur. And often, I am home for the weekend, which is most weekends. I have to justify why I'm traveling so much to my neighbors, even my butcher. He's a great butcher, but he wants to know where I've been and why I'm not at home more. And I said, well, I'm promoting trade. Well, so what? What's that got to do with me? I said, well, it's got to do with creating wealth and jobs in Canada, and then if I'm smart, and I really did my homework, I'll be able to say, well, you know that business that is now developing on Arbuthnot, 2 blocks away? Well, it's taking advantage of tariff reductions in the free trade agreement that we just signed with the Asian Pacific nations. If we can't relate the value of trade to the people in our communities, then we're not going to be able to sustain the political support to sign free trade agreements. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So we want to find ways of supporting Canadian businesses as they export, especially those who don't have a lot of experience at it. And that's why we are so excited about bolstering the investment in the Trade Commissioner Service in Canada. You know that we have trade commissioners in 160 cities around the world. And they have expertise, and that expertise is available to businesses for no charge. is the best deal in town. And they have sectoral and geographic experience, and they are available to those of you in the room. How many in the room have used the Trade Commissioner Service? More than half of you. Well, those of you who haven't yet used it, you could profit from their expertise and their capacity to hook you up in these markets where you have no experience that will ease the way. We have been very active in the last 2 years. We have signed a trade agreement with the European Union. We have signed a trade agreement with NAFTA, the new NAFTA, and we have signed the CPTPP. And if you combine these 3 agreements, that is 1.5 billion customers for Canada in our free trade zone. Canada is the only G7 nation with a free trade agreement with the other 6, which gives us a competitive advantage as an investment hub. And we think that there is every opportunity to take advantage of these agreements while we negotiate others, because we believe fundamentally that a free trading system internationally, rules-based, that has kept us prosperous internationally since the Second World War, will keep us prosperous moving forward as we fight the forces of protectionism and as we gather together with like-minded nations to free up the international trading system. It's so important. And so is access to talent. How many of you in the room sometimes have trouble finding the people you need in your businesses? 1. 2, you're very lucky. I don't think you're in the majority. A lot of people are having a tough time, and we know that access to talent is absolutely key. So the Government of Canada's skill strategy targets the mobility of workers, and we now have dedicated services and shorter timelines with a 2-week turnaround in some cases. Of the 40,000 people who have come to Canada under the Global Skills Strategy, more than half were highly skilled tech workers. This helps companies recruit the skilled people they need to compete globally. And according to the Human Capital Index of the World Economic Forum, Canada ranks 3rd in the G20 in meeting business needs for high-quality workers. Canada is where technology comes to life, and no more so than in this city of Toronto, which was the fastest growing tech job market in 2017. And our government will continue to provide targeted support where it's most useful and where it's practical. And we are investing in small business support through CanExport. These grants of up to $50,000 per project makes it possible for small business owners to take their businesses to the next level, to get on a plane, to visit trade shows, to meet people in their sector internationally. We have examples here in this room. The CIBC received CanExport funding to host a forum in Bangalore in support of Canada's trade diversification strategy. 98% of Canadian small and medium-sized enterprises are eligible for CanExport financing. Our team is ready for opportunities in India and looks forward to developing future partnerships. And Export Development Canada already has a significant footprint in India with a permanent on-the-ground presence for 15 years now. And EDC has strong relations with the best businesses to connect with in India and uses this network to drive trade from Canada. And I understand you will be hearing more today from EDC's India's Chief Rep. Nigel Selling later in today's session. The business and investment opportunities between Canada and India are exciting. The Trade Commissioner Service has launched its Bring India to Canada initiative. Our trade commissioners from India are traveling across the country to meet with companies and organizations to share opportunities with Canadian SMEs. I've listed a few examples of the tools we offer, but this is just the beginning. What is not at the beginning is this long and rich history between our two countries. The power of people, of family, of shared values, of diversity, of freedom, of democracy, taking root in these places on oceans apart, but connected by history and the aspirations for our children. We were talking about children, and I am a new grandfather. And Sophia Annabelle is 9 months old. this changes one's perspective of the world. Because I now think not only about my children's generation, but my grandchildren's. And what I see in the relationship between Canada and India is prosperity and opportunity for them. My granddaughter will thrive, and I want her to be able to make a choice to do business with India. Thank you for your attention.